And we are live. Welcome to the beginning of the end with Cheb Sheneb coming out of the sky and giving everyone coronavirus. Too dank. Sorry.
Way to timestamp that one.
That's a good point. But this is also a stream, so I could cut that out.
If you think about it, how slow we are at editing this, it'll just be like 15,000 people a day will be dying when you'll be saying that. Think about it.
It's all jokes now.
Rip. But yes, welcome to the new episode. This is the end of the season episode, and today I have with me the core crew. I got Esri, lovely co-host.
What's up, babes? This is Esri. I'm on lockdown in New Haven.
We got Kyle.
Hey, self-isolation in Calgary still, and it's still snowing.
We got Tom, aka Commandante Alpha.
Just after switching off my ventilator, good to go.
So, let's start by kind of going around the horn and discussing kind of like a vibe check of the season finale. Opening up, I felt like I liked it. I liked it better than episode 9, actually. What I really enjoyed about it was that I was expecting them to go like Disco's end of season 2 level like space battle, which was a pretty cool sequence. And they kind of stayed true to like the Picard is the more. There's still some action, but Picard is a more like kind of philosophical, thoughtful trek. Maybe not necessarily utopian and optimistic, but little like slightly slower paced. And so instead of a huge space battle, we got the climax with Admiral Riker leading a fleet, and that fleet confronting the Romulan fleet, and they solved it. Picard solved it diplomatically, as Picard would. And I like that. I don't know. I just liked a lot. I liked this episode a lot. I mean, okay. One thing I do want to talk about for sure, or at least mention, is I screamed when I saw 7 of 9 and Raffi holding hands. I was
Me too. It's about time.
It was
Which leads me
very
to
good.
this question. What's that?
Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Leads me to this question. Is 7 of 9 bi, or did she break up with Chakotay because she realized she's a lesbian? Because 7 of 9 and Voyager didn't know who the fuck she was.
She didn't know who the fuck she was, and towards the end, she was like, I'm learning to be human. In Rick Berman's world, that means I'm learning to be heterosexual. And then maybe like a lot of things, she's like, okay, maybe this is an okay sometimes food, or what about this other way of being human? So yeah, I would say at the very least we have canon bi, but it seems like the only spoken about dating history in this series is,
Women.
Oh
yeah, for sure.
like power.
So we got that out of the way. That's really important. We talked about that. So Esri?
What about poor Harry Kim? What about poor old Harry?
What about Harry Kim? Just, I don't know. If any Voyager character knows what's good for them, they try to stay out of this series. Like, unless you're 7 of 9, you're gonna die. So let's see.
Well, I was just gonna say real quick, they could correct the wrong they did to Harry Kim and make him like a captain or like a commodore or admiral or something. Because
Mega Admiral Kim.
Once in the 7 years of Voyager, he was a little ensign.
Yeah,
and he was rated like poorly a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time.
They actually demoted and then re-promoted Tom Paris rather than promoting Harry Kim at all.
Tells you everything you need to know about Harry Kim.
Hey, in the future that they establish, that it gets retconned or whatever, they establish that he at least makes captain. He's captain of the USS Rhode Island, I believe.
That sounds like a small ship. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I was about to say it's probably a Hoopty if it's named after the Rhode Island, but
It's a Voyager class. It looks like Voyager. So
okay.
I don't know what Voyager's designation is.
Intrepid.
Anyway, so what did I think of this episode? I think it's impossible for me to reflect on this episode without just bringing up that this is the series trying to be like, hey, remember when we killed your friend in Star Trek Nemesis for no reason, for, weird Picard clone Billy Corgan leading Night Elves, and it was tremendously unsatisfying, and it was basically blink and you miss it, and this arc we've been building for over like a decade just ends in an explosion during an action sequence, and you don't even get time to think or process it at all, and Data's gone. Like, this is Star Trek being like, yeah, sorry about that. let's give you some premium like grief time with this. Let's make this something that you can live with. And so the whole ending sequence where, and of course, if you haven't seen the episode, watch the fucking episode, where Picard dies, and then is resuscitated as a synthetic life form, and he gets to visit the precious golem. Or I'm sorry, he gets to visit his precious friend Data for one last fucking time. Is just a love letter to fans. And this show doesn't do cheap nostalgia. What it does is those moments that it gives you, those glimpses into the past, it always has something heavy hanging over it. And in this case, we get some like positivity about, we get some positive answers about a bunch of speculation that there had always been about Data living, that went through Nemesis, and was even something we were talking about throughout this whole series, is whether one of those precious neurons survived so that his personality could be reached again. Because, more so than the organism that held Data, it was this mind that he had developed that was the most precious thing. And, as it turns out, the B4 transfer didn't work in the android, but it preserved his neurons, it preserved the information, and one of those little things did turn into some version of Data down the line. And then, of course, the twist being that Data's had time to reflect on this, and he's like, you know what? I don't want to just be a synthetic immortal. I want to be human. I want to die, because that's what humans do. Yeah.
You can make that same about a dog or a lichen.
But he wants to be organic. He wants to be an organic person. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm only being facetious.
Yeah. Well,
in the emotional moment, deny the emotion.
Yes, Tom. Run from your feelings. Run from mortality. This show is really good about confronting you. It's good about confronting that sense of, I don't really want to like look at this. I'm not. It's gonna blue skies. I'm not gonna think about it. Like, no. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. We have treasured old friends that have to deal with this now, and I mean, you do get some like really classic moments. Admiral Riker showing up with the Federation fleet behind him, but you don't get to enjoy it for long. An uncomplicated moment of like, yeah, the Federation's back. Star Trek diplomacy. Let's do it. And you don't get to enjoy that for long before Picard starts to have fits and stops and like, oh shit, this could be the end.
Yeah. One thing I didn't say earlier is like how much of I was sobbing throughout like the last series, like when everyone's grieving the death of Picard, and then when you see Picard in that strange dream-like sequence meeting virtual Data in like a simulation, it wasn't clear to me if that was the afterlife or, I mean, he said something about some weird quantum flux, blah blah blah, technobabble. We've seen there's like an episode of Voyager where Janeway's like dead, quote unquote, and her like spirit's like walking around Voyager, like, and it was some weird quantum, flim flam. So I was
There's
like,
a
oh,
TNG
is that
episode like that too.
yeah? There's a TNG episode like that, and so I'm like, oh my god, so this is like that's actually the afterlife, and this is like some kind of like Data's quantum flim flam ghost is like talking to Picard. That wasn't quite what was happening, but I was sobbing after that when Picard was in the Golem, and they unhook Data's little machine that keeps his brain running, and I fucking kept sobbing. Like, it was really intense. Anyway, Kyle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, the emotional core of this episode was definitely Data's death. That was affecting, especially because we know that the actor himself, Brett Spiner, is now dead. So, like, there was a lot of, like...
What?
No, he's not.
No, he's not?
No,
On,
he's
so,
not.
you mean on Twitter?
Oh, he's dead. I was misinformed.
You mean on
that
Twitter,
was my
right?
emotional core, because I thought he was dead.
Not so. You might be thinking
that
of,
is good. That is very good news.
you might be thinking of Renee Auberjonois, who played Odo.
Yeah,
Or,
exactly.
Okay.
So, well, there's been a lot of Star Trek deaths in the last year, and for some reason, I thought that he was dead as well. So that actually, even though I was wrong, it did affect me quite a bit. I was like, wow, it was weird they didn't have like something like dedicated to the memory of this guy at the end, and I was like, oh, okay, so he's not dead now. But yeah, no, like that was definitely the emotional core of the episode. The stuff with Picard didn't really affect me at all, because I was like, well, of course he's going to get put into the Golem. And so it was more like like to the extent that I was feeling things about it, I was feeling things about like the Data relationship. And what was really strange to me in this episode was that we had
a lot of noise on the line. I don't know who's.
Somebody's typing furiously to get me the deets on how Spider's not dead. It's very alive.
I did check that. He is in fact alive. I'm also promoting the stream. So
yeah, he was interviewed recently on the Ready Room with Will Wheaton. So if he's dead, it was like recently, and Wikipedia hasn't had time to update.
No, I think you're all very right, and I'm very wrong. Yeah, but it was very strange to me, the scene where you have Elnor and Rafi, who are crying over Picard's death. Because, like, does that just mean that, like, the other people in the complex who are doing this operation didn't bother to tell them that he's getting transferred to a Golem? Because that seems really abusive. Like, you know, like, is it just, like, a death over, like, his organic form that they were mourning over? Yeah.
There's no like guarantee that some bong rip transhumanist consciousness transfer is going to work. Like, right. So
it'd be like crying if somebody was going into surgery and it was like a life-saving, like a life or death kind of surgery scenario. That's how I interpreted it. Of course, I didn't make that clear in order to hold suspense. Listening to another podcast, I got the idea in my head that this is going to be actually the secret series finale, because New Trek is kind of bait and switch like that with how they interact with the media. But
so yeah,
I also had it in my head that the Golem was there, so I was like, maybe he's actually dying for good, and it doesn't work, and so that's why I was emotional. But also the acting was really good.
Yeah, it was.
As far as like
It was.
the grieving.
It's all in the performances, in the way that it's put together. Because that's the only thing that can make this plausible. You're not going to kill off your main character. I mean, Patrick Stewart was on The View asking Whoopi Goldberg to come back for season 2. That would be a weird thing to do if there wasn't a season 2. Like,
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they came up with a reason to have, Picard played by Patrick Stewart. Great. That was the only possible concern I had with a Gollum or something. They bring back Billy Corgan, Tom Hardy, like, yeah, we made you younger. Don't you want to be younger? I don't know. Yeah, I found that pretty, I was sort of in a state of disbelief until I saw the scene with Rafi and Elnor, and that's I definitely hit close to home. Those are real feels, and they did a good job of putting that stuff forward and making you feel it. Again, these are cherished characters. If they don't just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how else to say this, but like, look at there's such a differential of sensitivity between like killing Data, being like, oh, let's like really resolve what we did to Data like 15 years ago, and just like 5 episodes ago, they just rip each Eb's eye out. Like, like clearly they're a little more sensitive to the next generation than they are to Voyager.
Yeah.
Well, and I think having, I again, as I said during that stream in that episode, I don't think it was necessary to be as graphic, but I do think like if you want to convey that the universe is dangerous, the galaxy is dangerous, and that there are real stakes, and that sometimes people will just die in an unceremonious, grotesque way, like somebody has to die in an unceremonious, grotesque way, and I think making it Icheb is pulling on those heartstrings, especially since 7 of 9 just came on the ship. But Tom, we haven't got your thoughts, so you go ahead and meme for a while and then share your real thoughts.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I forgot to mention. I don't know if I was on the show when Icheb got killed, but I went to boarding school with a guy who looked extremely like Icheb used to look like on Star Trek. And he was an extremely eccentric guy. He get this. He was a train spotter. He was really into trains, and he used to we used to play like the church organ. We were like classical players, and he would climb into the organ so he could get to. There was like a high window, stained glass window, and he could look out, and he could look out to see just the tiniest edge of a train that would go past at like 4:30. And he would say, "There goes the Wexford Express." I'm like, "All right, yeah, Peter." And but he used to have a Walkman, and he had tapes of different train journeys, and he would put them in. And this would be like, this is the Cork Express. This one would be the. I met him like about 5 or 10 years later in Dublin one day, and he was, "God, Peter, do you remember you listened to the train track on your Walkman?" He's like, "No, I never did that." I was like, "You did." He's like, "No."
What?
Own your strangeness as a child. It doesn't matter if you're an adult. Who fucking cares? You're a kid when you do that weird shit. Anyway.
Yeah, sorry. Back to the episode. Peter was a very, very strange guy. He was a nice guy though. I thought I did not really look. I thought the 9th episode I really liked it. Finally, all this slow build up, we had an action episode where plot lines drew together, and there was for me there was pace, a coherent pace to this, much more like the pacing of Discovery. But in this one, it still had that, but I didn't really like the plot line kind of tie-ups that they had. I feel like that they chickened out of a darker plot line, that I kind of wanted the Federation to be in on the Jacques Vache stuff. I wanted them to be in on at the highest level being against synthetic life, and I think that would have led to much more kind of dynamic, maybe 3 series of a kind of an arc than just like one baddie who's the top of at the top of the security commander row or whatever. And so like I thought that thing when Riker just turns up with the stuff and goes, "Hey everybody, I'm here to rescue you." And then imagine the Jacques Vache people are going like, well, the destroyer is the end of every piece of life on Earth. And they're like going, perhaps if we're in that situation, you would actually risk the Federation just attacking you and trying to destroy the destroyer. So I thought like they folded. I thought like, is the Federation going to be that far ahead of the Romulan fleet? To me, that's highly debatable. Like, so I feel like they chickened out of what would have been a better kind of more kind of dark resolution. That was my overall thing for the plot. I didn't get any of the emotional stuff out of Picard because I always knew he was going to live. You know, they're not going to call a whole season, do it 3 seasons of a thing and have the main character die after the first one. Like, you know, it's not what do you call it?
Game of Thrones.
Not Game of Thrones. But so I didn't really, I like seeing Data. Look, I thought I was like 50-50 whether they were going to bring Data back in. I thought that's what they were really going to do. I thought Data was going to be resurrected and he was going to be a character. Actually. And I think that would have been, personally, I would have much preferred that. Even if they did have to do all that de-aging special effects on Data's face to get rid of the wrinkles, so and he can't even, it looks like he's not able to act at all. But it was like watching The Irishman. But you know, so you know, plot-wise, I felt kind of let down, and I like, this was the big thing with this Dark Destroyer. I thought this was going to be the whole plot line for 3 seasons, and it felt kind of like they just wrapped it up in 5 minutes at the end, and everybody sailed away smiling. And unless it's like there's more to come from that dominant main line, I think it was kind of like a lost point for me, like kind of a lost plot line. I hope that that's not it, because it left me feeling like cheated in that plot line. I thought that plot could have gone for 3-4 seasons, just that one as a massive, you know, battle between these different philosophies. If they go off and just do something else now, I'll be disappointed.
I think you should expect that. What you're articulating reminds me of my feelings about the Klingon War towards the end of Star Trek Discovery Season 1. However, I guess I'd say this, is that I thought having a kind of like complicated, like 3-sided conflict towards the end was more kind of like sophisticated than you normally get outside of Deep Space Nine. And so I was happy to see something complicated. I do agree that, you know, we've talked a little bit about like potential pacing issues, how it started off very ponderous. By the time you get to the end, you know, we're trying to pack a lot in. There are some things that seemed a little rushed, like the idea that the Federation has reversed its synth ban already. We don't have to go fight for it. We don't have to have Measure of a Man for a whole season to legislate, you know, synthetic life. That's what I was hoping for, something like that.
It felt just like, like we had all this slow development of bits that really didn't matter too much. And then in the last quarter of an hour, it just went, and then just pulled the strings out of all the plot lines. And we're like going, and then they just go engage. And like, I was just like feeling like, you know,
yeah.
Just when they started getting the plot really going for me, they fucking pulled the rug from underneath it.
Yeah. So I would agree with. Yeah.
Sorry, before we go on, I just want to also say that is it Elnor? He is like the idiot child of the whole season, isn't he? He's got no personality, no character. He's just like there's nothing to his character at all. Like the only good thing he did in the entire, I know like some of you probably think, oh, he looks really nice, but like apart from that, like he's done one thing with a sword, and then like that's it. The rest of it's just like falling around going,
They
He's
haven't
supposed
given
to-
him much to do.
No, they haven't given him much to do, but like I think his whole thing is that like he is a warrior, but also innocent in a way, and naive in a way, like very childlike in a way, but also like very badass.
But like
I think I like that.
But yeah, no, fair enough. Like but I mean, like when you look at it, sometimes it's a character is not written and you can't do anything with it. And sometimes an actor is cast sometimes for a look more than the acting ability. And I don't get any presence from him in anything. He's just like a total nothing character for me. So compared to Raffi, say Raffi's an infinitely better character. You know what I mean? Or the fellow with all the terrible accents. Like
Yes.
he's a proper character. You feel his character, but with Eleanor, I feel nothing. I just thought I should say that.
That's when you look at the interviews about the show, it's clear that they did a lot more writing that ended up on the cutting room floor, that they had backstories. Another character that I felt was thin. Then the last few episodes have done a better job of fleshing her out is Lieutenant Rizzo or whatever her real rank is.
She's a lot better than Eleanor. Yeah, I think she can act. I'm a bit disappointed they just fucking killed her off. She was one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. 709 totally iced her. It's great.
This is Sparta scene.
Yeah.
Like, has anyone done that yet? Like, absolutely, they must have, right? Where she says, "This is," and then cut in Sparta.
Kyle, you can get 1,000. You can get 1 million YouTube hits. You can be the one.
Nice.
Monetize that shit. Throw an ad on
need-
front. You'll never have to work again.
We need that. We still need the Zotfosh reacts to 2 Girls 1 Cup edit. So we should probably pivot to usually what we do in the show is we discuss political, philosophical, psychological themes that kind of relate to Star Trek as a utopian or sometimes dystopian setting. There wasn't a lot to draw on because this is so plot and less philosophical, if that makes any sense. This is a plot-heavy episode. And I mentioned it as like the more philosophical show because it didn't do the combat climax, but the diplomatic resolution. But with that said, it's still a plot episode and not really a philosophical episode. But there was one thing I wanted to talk about that we touched on but didn't really develop fully last episode with the idea of like the synths kind of modeling like social minority. You could put any plug in any variable there. Like you could use that as like an analysis of like or an allegory for like trans lesbian separatism or black nationalism.
That was the first one that came to my mind, obviously. I mean,
right. And so far as like there's kind of like an element of like revenge, like destroying other organics who are hunting us down, or and there's also the element of like wanting to build their own society separate from the rest because they don't feel like they could fit in, and not because they're too different, but because the enemy is too aggressive, and so we just have to destroy them, build our own society, that kind of like mentality, if you will. And you kind of see how Picard touches on a little bit on like what builds that mentality is fear, right? But like the thing Picard does better this episode than he did last episode by, he came off really sounding very liberal last time. Like, let me speak for you, But what he does get right this episode is he talks about fear as a teacher. All they were taught by a couple of hermits and fear is a terrible teacher. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to point out that the show is not written by, Marxists or something. And that what Picard promises is something like the best instincts of the Federation. And the meaning of Will Riker showing up with the Armada is that hope is still alive. That, this organization isn't like like maybe I don't know how far they're going to get into this, but a lot of the things we were predicting about, statification tendency being the end of the Federation or something, maybe this is a bit more of a corruption narrative. You had one fucky admiral or one fucky commodore that spoils the bunch, and we just got to get rid of that one. Put Rikers in their place, people that have like a connection to wisdom and truth, and boom, we could regenerate the Federation. I think if there's something that I found maybe like disappointing about that turn, it would be that. On the other hand, Admiral Will Riker showing up with ships felt good. So
no, come on now. That's like saying Liz Warren for president. Liz Warren
is it?
for
Is it?
president, Liz Warren. They've done this plotline so many times as a one bad apple in the Federation, and look how close they were to catching them, and now they're grand. That's why I thought they were going to go somewhere better, and it was going to be a systemic darkness, instead of a white knight.
What the fuck? Like, what show are we talking about here? Like,
well, here's the thing too. Like, a common complaint among like longtime Star Trek fans, something I might have even heard from Tom, but maybe I'm misremembering. But a common complaint about fans of the '90s series and TOS is that New Trek has abandoned Roddenberry's vision of optimism and utopia, right? So I think this is a scenario where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you go grimdark, which might be like a little bit better storytelling, which was true with Roddenberry's Utopia, like sometimes following the rules of that Utopia made for like lackluster storytelling. Let's be honest, right? Like,
no,
if you go for the grimdark, you're going to piss off the people who want the optimism back. But if you don't, you're going to maybe have slightly less interesting storytelling. And I think part of the Roddenberry utopia is that this utopian society is never fully corrupted to its core. It's always a couple of bad actors. However, according to the show's own logic, as soon as there was a synth attack, it wasn't just Admiral Clancy, it wasn't just Admiral O. There were whole worlds that were willing to leave the Federation over this. There was a majority of the Federation Council that supported the ban and supported stopping the Romulan evacuation. It wasn't just a couple of bad apples, and I do think one valid criticism, and I think Tom's criticisms are valid. I just think you can't have it both ways, and I don't think Tom's trying to, but this is to the fans. You can't have it both ways. You can't. Sorry.
I think they did a good job narratively of walking the line between grimdark and like a justified, earned kind of optimism. But
Sure.
I think anything but beyond full black pill won't satisfy certain people. But all the same, like
How do you? No, but say for example, Discovery has been darker than this has. Discovery hasn't had an ending feeling like that, has it? Yes.
What? This is a way better executed ending than either of the two.
Yeah,
Discovery endings, and I like Discovery.
What was the? I'm just trying to remember. What was the end? Well, what was the end of season 1 in Discovery? Was that not?
That was terrible.
They end the Klingon war by holding up an iPad and saying, we could blow up the planet. And there's a genocidal conspiracy in Starfleet influenced by the Mirror Universe, Georgiou, that Burnham essentially mutinies and goes, "We are Starfleet. Haven't you read Adorno? Genocide is bad." And that's it. And they're like, well, okay, maybe we shouldn't do genocide, I guess. It is way more like we're making this sound. Maybe because I forget. I forget. It wasn't the best part of that season.
Yeah.
Kyle, your thoughts?
So I think one direction they might take this going forward is sort of building off what you were saying, Sophie. In this particular case, Starfleet was able to intervene to protect the synths under a treaty that they had previously established. And they kind of had like a degree of executive power of action as a military force that was operating outside of the restrictions of Federation government oversight, right? This is like Clancy and Riker getting together, being like, all right, we've got the regulations and laws that we need to act here. Let's go do it. And just acting, bring a full armada out to stand off against the Romulans. Which, you know, I'm sure many of the members of the council would be down for, just because they hate the Romulans. But we didn't ever get like a politicking thing. I think this was just kind of done within Starfleet as like an executive action. And so like we might see in the future that the sort of like, you know, heroic individuals within Starfleet who are acting against the corrupting tendencies may run up against, you know, that sort of entrenched political interest that we saw earlier in the series, that was, you know, describing the Federation members who are ready to walk over the synth situation.
Well, and I wonder too how this is going to, because so this episode in particular opened up with a shot of Michael Burnham, you know, what is it, 1,000, 2,000 years in the future. This is a badass shot of her longer hair, because she gets to the future a year before everyone else does. Longer hair, holding a tattered Federation flag on a war-torn planet. And there was an interview, I think it was with Frakes, talking about, and this was surprising to me, but it makes a certain amount of sense, talking about the idea of like optimism in Roddenberry's Utopia that I was talking about earlier. And he was saying, we hear the fans, you want some of that optimism in Utopia, good vibes again. You're going to get it in Disco Season 3. And I think Disco is going to kind of pivot and be a very different show at this point, because it's going to be about... it might be their chance, their like apology for Enterprise as well, because they kind of bungled the initial founding of the Federation. It should have been like a very fascinating and awesome show. And what I've seen, it was okay. You know, I liked it, but it wasn't as good as it could have been.
Yeah, I hear season 4 is good because they do that.
Right. But, you know, with all that said, I wonder how these shows are going to like play off of each other. You know, I wonder if my prediction about this being kind of like the beginning of the end of the Federation, it's not clear if I was right, but I'm wondering if as the series continues, if you start to see kind of like what Kyle was talking about, the heroic individuals of Starfleet like bumping up against corruption in the government and complacency, and how if these are going to play off of each other. This is still like way ahead in the future, but like from Burnham's standpoint, this is still like 100 years or so. So it's not like, you know, this is closer to Disco Season 3 than Disco Season 2 is.
Right. And yeah, I wonder if this is going to be kind of like a late Roman Empire Byzantine situation where you have these heroic efforts to shore up the institutions, which are just ultimately futile as the institutions like decay over time, get weaker and weaker.
The way that I thought the show was going was actually well represented by that moment when Jurati and Picard are like alone on the ship and trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? We're basically caught between like 2-3 fleets of much bigger powers and states with entrenched interests. And we're just a tiny little ship trying to do what's right. I thought that the show is going to kind of double down on that feeling, that maybe we were going to get in the way that like Ferengnar, becomes decadent as in the eyes of Quark's Holovlog. Ferengnar has become decadent. So I'm going to go start my own Ferengnar. I'm going to make Free Cloud. Cool. Like I thought there was going to be some kind of indie effort or something, but it's also, I guess, part of the show that like you can't really effectively do like indie justice efforts. You end up looking like the Fenris Rangers, like a desperate band of vigilantes. Like without society without like a greater part of society on your side, you are just like a sort of like terror cell for justice in a way. Like, but I don't know, like, our predictions vis-a-vis the end of season 2 of Discovery and the AI overlords in Picard didn't really pan out. But I did want to talk a little bit about the synthetic demon race of robots that are going to trickle through the solar anus. These chthonic like bug creatures that are really like, honestly, the only direction that we're given is essentially that they're hell spawns. They're the ultra mega demon. And like the Jat Vash mythology seems about right on that point. That shit was positively satanic.
Yeah, what it really reminded me of was so the plot from the PC space shooter series from the 90s, Free Space. So in Free Space, you have these this race of destroyers called the Shivans that come out of a space portal, and you have in the first game these two different opposed races. You have the humans, and you have like an alien race that they were at war with. Have to band together to take down the Shivans, and it's like, yeah, we won. And then in the second game, it's a number of years later, and they've formed a government together. They federated, and they've developed, this really strong fleet. We're gonna take down the Shivans, and by the end of the second game, it becomes apparent that even the best military efforts that they have developed are utterly insufficient to fight the true might of the Shivan race. And the Shivans are presented in a very similar way, very demonic, this mysterious race of individuals from beyond the stars. But they decided not to really go like a Shivan war route by just closing off that portal. We don't see the Federation Romulan alliance against the galactic invaders. It goes a completely different way. Of course, you could also make an analogy to Babylon 5, right? Babylon 5 also has a very similar plot line about that. It's interesting that they just cut it off. I guess it's going to be kind of in the background as like a super ultra mega threat that could come back at any time. Someone else gets a hold of the codes, right, for calling the Shivans in.
That's where I feel like that this whole thing might not be over, because they just established in Star Trek canon a race of like ultra evolved synthetic beings that lay in waiting for the cries for help from synthetics, and like they've just been there for how long, and they've always been there. Like when Kirk was fighting Khan, you know what I mean? There were just like ultra synthetic shit laying in the cut in the background, waiting for the signal the whole time.
Here's a thought I had too. Is Sutra the lore to Soji's data?
Yes.
We saw Dr.
100%
Soong.
yes.
We saw Dr. Soong go beep boop and like car alarm her off or whatever, and she passes out. I have a hard time Dr. Soong would kill her with that.
No, I don't think so.
So that'd be the problem. If she goes dark and brings him back again, and they have to go and do it again. I hope that's it.
Maybe she's the destroyer. Maybe she's the real destroyer.
Right. And so she is still a threat, and I bet you you still have like a three-way conflict ultimately. Like now you got the Federation on the side of Picard, problematically or not. You have the Federation on the side of Picard, but then you still have the Zot Watch headed by O, and you still have Sutra. And I bet you the Village of Synths, once Dr. Singh tells them that it was Sutra who killed Saga, not Narek, or Narek helped him. She helped Narek. They're not going to like want to chill with her, so she's going to run off and be, luring about until she has a chance to build, and she's going to need to gather resources now because she can't just build it with super intelligent synths, so
yeah, it's even worse than she helped Narek. Narek helped her, like
yeah, it was her idea. That's very true.
And there's a kind of like retcon of the whole, like, are you the sister who dies or the sister who lives or whatever? Like, at first we thought the sisters were, Soji and Daj, but once you get to Capelius, like, you realize this is all one big synth family. Soji and Sutra are kind of sisters too. Like, as far as they're concerned, that's how that works. So she could very well be the destroyer. They could continue this plot line. I feel like you can't gesture towards an enemy that enormous and then just be like, well, next season we're going to visit the Vulcans, like maybe that's going to be the long-term threat. Kyle put in mind the Dominion War, to me, thinking about the Federation and the Romulans going, well, okay, I guess we'll be on the same side. You fucking shifty ass, like kind of alliance. That would be an interesting nod to DS9, of course, without daring to speak its name. And obviously the only thing that could fight this super race of robots lying in the cut might be perhaps a prophet and their half human Jesus child.
So, oh god, I lost it.
Maybe Q.
This is what I was gonna say. Sutra has a direct sister because they're billed as twins, right? The sister that was killed by Captain Vadimir. Maybe she is the forebearer, and then Sutra is the destroyer, and Soji is just kind of got caught up.
Yeah, she got mismithed or misnewsed. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, so I mean, it could go a lot of different directions, but I think it is fair to say that this plot will be in the back pocket of the writers going forward, despite the very optimistic and positive ending that we got in this episode. I do really hope that they keep the full crew together going into the next season, like so that we see that we actually get to see Rafi and Seven of Nine's relationship be like a real thing instead of like literally in the background of the scene with like no apparent build up that I could remember. Like, there's definitely a lot of lesbian stuff like established with Seven of Nine, but I don't remember any scenes of them together that like suggested that happening. Like, it was also not really clear what the time frame was from like the other stuff happening to that particular scene. So like, people hook up, like it's a thing. Right. Like, we saw that happen with Dr. Girardi and Rios, right? Like,
which gets less creepy now because it's more of like we're like actually maybe gonna try this out.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I want to see that relationship like actually have some substance going into the next season, and don't fridge one of them, please.
Please. Don't kill the black lesbian this time.
This is your second chance, new Star Trek. Don't kill them. That's all you gotta do. That's all you gotta do.
It was also very funny when we were watching the scene between Seven of Nine and Rizzo, where it was like my partner, we were watching, and the two of them square off, and my partner's like, "Oh, I ship it," and then Rizzo is like, says something about being like a half meat or something like that to Seven of Nine, and she was like, "Oh, I don't ship it. Ship is canceled. Shortest ship in history."
I mean, yeah. And Rizzo was saying fucked up stuff, like, all Annika got for her birthday was assimilated. It's like, oof, ugh, you're so evil.
So
yeah,
as far as the romance between Raffi and Seven of Nine, I've been reflecting on that, and in that short scene, comparing the intimacy of Raffi and Seven of Nine versus Rios and Girardi. Rios and Girardi, like they lace hands and then they kiss, right? Whereas Seven of Nine and Raffi just like lace hands. And I think like that kind of initial like touch of hand holding could be like the beginning of like flirtation and showing interest. And so I think what the show is setting up, the reason why there's nothing established is because there's nothing established. That's just what that's where the characters are at. And that's like the first sign of like romantic interest between the two of them. With Raffi, all we know is that she's had children. So there was nothing to indicate that she was bi or lesbian or anything.
The only thing I can say is that in an interview with Michael Chabon, when the interviewer complained, we don't really see any like, gay relationships happening here. Chabon defends himself by saying, look, we didn't have someone roll up in a queer power shirt, but, we did gesture towards Seven and Bjayzl having a relationship. And in Chabon's opinion, in the writer's opinion, they also gestured towards Raffi and her old friend that asked her to never call her again. That's supposed to have been an ex-lover. But it's that I don't think was well telegraphed.
That wasn't well telegraphed, but Seven of Nine and Bjayzl was well telegraphed. And because I could see an ex-lover being like, never call me again. But in the context of that scene, Raffi was like wasted and asking for like a huge favor. And so I don't think, there's an ex-lover situation. I think, she's mad because she's being used for resources.
Right. It's there though. Like, and I guess there's just a lot going on there, but it's there in the writer's room. It's there in the performances if you're looking for it. But like, there was no like dialogue cues to let us know like, hey, they munching, like there's nothing.
I mean, Raffi has big dyke energy for sure. Much like cargo pants, I
know.
Like,
yeah, for sure.
And then you got Seven of Nine and like leather jacket. I was explicitly compared to Seven of Nine, by the way, in a way that made me like scream with joy. Anyway.
I saw that because you posted it on the page. that because of my new post sharing thing went directly to Emancipation Network's page. And I was like, okay.
That was probably one of the first post share things that happened, I think.
Automation fun.
Right. Shall we move on to the next topic here?
Yeah, sorry. I'm supposed to.
Yeah, we could just talk about Seven of Nine and Raffi holding hands for the next hour, probably.
I mean, I want to revisit this in the next season for sure.
Yeah, when there's something
to make these about. Guest appearances into like Seven of Nine's like on the cast now.
I feel like that was telegraphed when they had that last shot of the crew, and that's our crew for the series. It seems like.
Yeah, because it is truly a crew of misfits, and so it isn't just like, a few episodes of like, let's gather all our friends and we got to squat up, like we were talking about early in the season, but rather, you got some people coming in and out. You got some people who are half in, like Raffi. You got Rios who's there because he's getting paid, and now, they all had to overcome something. Rios had to overcome his guilt about Captain Vladimir. Rafi had to overcome his guilt about his child. Seven of Nine had to overcome her feelings of not fitting in and not having a home. You know, what's going to happen to the Fenris Ragers? Maybe they'll be fine without her. Soji had to like learn the truth about herself as a synth, and then learn to overcome the feelings of hatred towards organics, so on and so forth. So let's move on. I wanted to touch on the themes of the 9/11 allegory and the synth attack on Utopia Planitia. And I kind of wanted to compare and contrast. Now, I haven't watched this aspect of Enterprise, but I know in Enterprise there is a 9/11 allegory, and they are rah, let's get them terrorists, or whatever aliens did it.
Yeah, I think it's in season 3, from what I understand.
Right. So this is Bush's America Star Trek. You know, this is Faith of the Heart. Our shit got attacked. We got to go kick some terrorist ass or kick some alien ass,
Mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I would imagine they handled it a lot more Starfleety than Bush did. There's no mission accomplished banners. No? Okay.
Just from everything I hear about the show, and granted, I'm in like the middle of season 1 or whatever of Enterprise. I'm developing Faith of the Heart. Okay, it's about 12.5% loaded. Faith of the Heart loaded. Okay, but yeah, everything I hear about it is that Archer ends up making Cisco look like Picard in terms of like bending like Archer ends up making like Janeway look like a rule follower and that sort of thing, because he's willing to violate codes that basically haven't really been established yet, in service of protecting the potential for something like the Federation to form, which it forms in season 4.
Okay. That's a lot of good information. So we have it's even more rah-rah than I thought. So Enterprise is like we gotta back up the state, or what is the beginnings of the state in the case of the Enterprise. But the allegory is back the state. Like we gotta protect ourselves, we gotta get revenge on the people who attacked us. Now, fast forward to 20 years later, practically 19 years later, and we've had the war on terror, or whatever. Like we've been in Iraq and Afghanistan since then. Like there's people serving who weren't even born during 9/11. Like people who serve who are a bit older who don't have zero memories of 9/11. Everyone's kind of fucking sick of it by this point. And it's not even just like 9/11 truthers or radical lefties. Everyone's just kind of like, granted things have like kind of like ramped down, whatever. There's more drone bombings and more training of the military. But I also don't think that those governments can really, from what I've read, I'm no expert, but there's no way those governments can really stand without U.S. backing in Afghanistan. And so that's reflected in Picard, right? They were willing to entertain this 9/11 allegory was actually an inside job, right?
I kind of love that.
I love that too. So I guess my thought is like, is it okay for pop culture to do that now? It's not obvious. It's not so obvious that someone at Fox News would hear about it and be like, oh my God, America, but it's still, it's a bold move for pop culture. Am I wrong?
It puts Star Trek back on the side of cultural Marxism.
Good, I say.
Yeah, and like, it's certainly preferable to being rah-rah, like, the state's so great. But I think that part of the situation is also that that like kind of rallying around state power that you had after 9/11, like that kind of like, I guess, Republican patriotism that you saw at that time, is like nowhere really evident these days. It's a very different environment, and there is space to tell these kinds of stories without being sort of like not really red baited, but just like driven off the air, right?
Yeah, it is. It is a different. There's also the change of the past 19 years. Is I think it's become a lot more apparent, and it so much so that I think anyone who's like even poorly paying attention has a sense of America as a declining empire. It's just not really spoken out loud often, but not to say that America is, the U.S. is no longer powerful or anything, but it's on the downward.
I think that's in the air.
I have a stat for you, the 3 years. I don't know if you've seen this one. This is an interesting stat. They asked, one of these, polling companies, one of these, I don't know which one it was, one of the major ones. They asked in European people, they asked if there was a war between the United States and China, which side would you support? And it was 88% to 11 in favor of China.
Holy shit.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow. Daddy G. Jesus.
I could not believe that. Like, that blew my goddamn mind.
That is wow.
Wow.
That is surprising.
Was there an opt-out option? Like was there the Sweden option?
1% went for Mars.
That's got my vote.
Utopia Planitia.
Yeah, going straight for Utopia Planitia.
It's an inside job, baby.
And we've got a good 300 years before it's on fire, so 400 years, whatever.
So the other kind of like wrap-up theme or season-long theme is, has Picard redeemed himself? That was kind of like a big thing we talked a lot about in the earlier episodes was Picard is kind of an asshole, and he kind of deserves all of the fucking shit he's been getting because he's acting very selfishly, even when you think he's trying not to act selfishly. As recent as the Penthe episode, Picard just straight up told Sochi, like, my motivation for doing this is for myself, and no one's gonna stop you, not even you. Like,
I think he did redeem himself. Like in the last episode, it all came together, and it left me with a warm, fuzzy TNG Picard feeling. I think his failings kind of collapsed into action, and he did the right things then. So I think there was like definitely an element of writing closure. I don't expect him to be shown in such a dark light in the next seasons. I think they've shown him to burst through that, and now he's back old to himself.
Like a lot of the accusations against Picard in this season were that when the chips were down, he put his career on the line, and Starfleet said, "Go ahead, resign, just get out of here," right? And after that, he decided to retreat into retirement, into a kind of personal life, and not a heroic life. And he got a lot of shit for that decision, saying, like, where were you to help the refugees that you proclaimed yourself to be the savior of, right? And he, in this episode, he decides to, sacrifice the only thing he has left to sacrifice, which is his life. He says, I'm going to give you a gift. It's my life. So I'm going to put myself on the line. I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to go to the Federation and try to sort this out one-on-one. I'm just going to put my life on the line here. And I think that is really meant to be him transcending the limitations and the failings that were set up at the beginning of this series. Importantly, he also goes from being an XB to now being a synthetic himself.
Yeah.
So he literally goes over to the cause, right? Like he
Yeah.
says, like, if the ban on synths is on, then I don't have any home either because I am a synth now, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big part of his sort of transition, and kind of interesting to see a character this old at the end of his life, marking a new chapter in his life, which isn't
Yeah.
retirement, but is like a kind of grace period, like before death. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When on Nepenthe, when Picard said, I was really doing this for myself and because I didn't want to just sit there anymore, I've viewed that sympathetically, even though you could read that as being selfish, like to someone at the end of their life trying to make the last of their years not like a waste of time when they feel like that they squandered some important years. I've been sympathetic to that. I know people in their 70s trying to make a new start after their world's fallen apart. And there's something to me, our culture doesn't really have dignity for those people. And so I thought those elements of Picard are actually quite admirable, seeing him pick himself up, dust himself off, and try to get back on the horse. I think, politically speaking, I don't know if he earned all of the ire that he got. A lot of it was from xenophobic resentment. And yeah, a lot of it, okay, some of it is because, he abandoned the cause because he overplayed his hand and the Federation wouldn't back him up. So he just went home instead of mounting an independent effort. The show goes to great lengths to show you what a desperate and hopeless, like, I don't want to say hopeless, but what a desperate and duty-bound scenario it would have been to try to keep helping when the big powers pull out. That's reflected in 7 of 9 and Icheb. What tremendous, awful costs there would have been to try to keep pushing when essentially the way did not rule. There was no power willing to do the right thing. So this like last gasp where Picard offers his life to save the synths is him politically taking that independent option and sacrificing himself, his ego, to the greater cause. So in a political sense, I think he did some dodgy stuff, I guess, trying to, save the refugees of I would say ex-imperial people, but I mean, there were still like slavers and shit. Like he was trying to do, good xeno-humanitarianism with a group that had victims, but also victimizers in it. And so I think, I don't know, where it gets more complicated for me is his personal life. Now he does something tremendously unselfish by trying to sacrifice himself for a political goal. But so much of the distasteful things about Picard personally that come out over the course of this series is his instrumentalizing people that have feelings for him because of this great purpose, because of this great cause. And I think the show gives him a second chance to work on those things because the people that he wronged still love him. One thing that might have felt unearned is Rafi in the last episode saying, "Oh, you've done so much for me," when everything that you get from Rafi is that she's done so much for him. She sacrificed so many close connections, friends and family, to stay in the loop here, that it seems perverse for her to say that to him instead of the other way around. And but he has a chance to live up to that loyalty. he has a chance to be the father figure that he should have been to Eleanor. He has a chance to do those things, but we don't see him doing that stuff yet. And I think if the show says, oh, all that personal darkness is wiped away from season 1 because he did something bold and he redeemed himself politically, I would be disappointed. I think what they're going to do is explore more of that personal stuff. And because they almost just lost him, they're going to be willing to allow him to make amends, but he's going to have to do it. I don't think we've seen that yet. And I guess that's part of why there's a season 2, you know?
Yeah. I think you're right, but I do think that we also see Picard gesturing in that direction. So we see Picard's scene with Data, right? And accepting Data's decision to die and leaving Data. And also like being very honest about his feelings in a way that he has not been able to do up until this point. And then when we finally see Data die, we see Picard over the shoulder in his captain's uniform, basically giving last rites to Data, right? And that suggests a willingness to both be present with his emotions and also to not instrumentalize Data for any particular cause, right? He just accepts Data's decision, no matter how powerful he might have been as an AI ally that could have been used to good ends. He just says, no, this is what you want. This is the end that you have chosen for yourself. And he is like present and accepting of that decision. And so I think that does gesture in the direction of Picard's personal growth going forward. Even though I think you're right that his dark side of being that kind of instrumentalizing leader is likely to come up again in the next season.
That's a good point, though. That's him. I mean, not just like really being able to grieve and truly say goodbye in an emotional sense, but it's literalized because he's executing that, he's executing Data's last wish, which is to make it his last wish. I mean, that's a really powerful allegory for accepting loss, as to symbolically kill them, to let them go. But this is, So I think you're right, Kyle, that's going to clear the ground for him to be able to say, I love you to somebody without stumbling away right after.
So I think we should let's open the floor for like final thoughts about the season as a whole. We don't have to go around the horn, just any last words, and then we should probably call it.
One thread that I feel like wasn't adequately tied up: XBs.
Agreed.
What's the deal with the XBs?
Right, 7 of 9 kind of just like gets in La Serena, is like getting all cuddly with Raffi. There's still the Borg cube. We don't know what happens with them. We don't know what happens with the XBs on the Borg cube. And the show, this episode starts off focusing on that. Eleanor asks her, like, why would the XBs be better off dead? And 7 of 9's like, would I be better off dead? And of
How many
course,
times
Eleanor
Sorry, say it.
Eleanor in his innocence is like, well, I would miss you. Like, okay, like, there's value to life, Eleanor.
Well,
someone would miss them.
How many times have you had that conversation with people? Yeah, well, oh God, why even be one of these, ex-oppressed groups? That just sounds like the worst. Maybe they should just die. Like, yeah, but I'm one of those. It's like, oh, but I like you,
right?
Because that's the deal there. Like, I've had that conversation with people about non-binary people before. I'm like, well, do you like me? Because I'm one of these NBs. I mean XBs. That's actually a familiar conversation to some degree.
Sure.
And I want to see how because I'm assuming what happens is that because the the synths get less, organophobic, or whatever, they're going to be able to welcome beings like the XBs into the fold as sort of like, POC, people of cybernetics, like a sort of block, like, okay, we're not exactly the same, but we've experienced kind of similar stuff at the hands of the same people, for parallel reasons. So, UXBs, you're mixed. Okay. We're welcoming you into the fold. I think it would be nice to listen, that's all headcanon. It'd be nice to get the show doing that. And yeah, Seven not being the protector of the XBs now because she's on La Serena. We had explicitly the show had explicitly put forward that Elnor's job was to defend the XBs in Hugh's absence. He's also on La Serena. So what the show, I guess, should have done or wants us to fill in is that the XBs find a place on the planet, on hippie robot California planet.
Yeah, we'll just call it Planet NorCal.
What is it called?
Yeah.
Oh, damn it.
It's Planet NorCal. Don't worry about it. I feel like I bet you what's going to happen is that like season 2, episode 1, there's going to be like a throwaway line of like, oh yeah, the XBs are chilling on Planet NorCal now and they're having a good time. Don't even worry about it. It's fine. Which, you know what? Good. Like, I'm glad that that's all we really need for that, Like, they're already there. There's no, like, how do they get there? They're there, They can salvage the Borg cube and use this tech to kind of, like, build up their commune or whatever. Like, it's all good.
Mm.
And we have seen, like, this first series be really focused on the plight of the stateless, right? Both with the case of the Romulan refugees and then with the XBs, that being brought up again and again. The first sort of protector that the XBs found in the Romulan Star Empire, like the rump of it,
The slavers,
was just purely exploitative, right? More or less like a honeypot to catch Soji was kind of the deal. And willing to just dispose of them as things and not as people. And hopefully they have found a home in NorCal. We'll see. But I do expect that the whole plot of the Romulan refugees is not going to simply go away. I think it's going to come back. I think the XBs are going to come back. I do think that the scene of Picard negotiating that standoff between the Federation and the Romulans was a really perfect kind of tie-up for like the whole like plot line that started in the neutral zone, right? Like that plot arc for Picard as a character as this go-between between the Federation and the Romulans was really nicely referenced there. But I don't think that relationship is over. So we'll just have to see in the next season. I'm very interested to see what Picard's relationship is to the XBs now that he is no longer. Well, he is historically an XB, but not physically an XB. So he may have that identity still. It's going to be real complicated being Picard.
I know that feeling.
So last thoughts before we go. We're at 1 hour 18 minutes.
True.
So please be brief.
I think that the next season won't suffer hopefully from I think the pacing issues that the first season suffered from. So I hope that will happen, and I really do hope they develop the same plot line. I hope it's not a totally new plot line. I hope it's still the synth, because I think that's a juicy plot line. There's loads of places that could go, and I hope I do hope they tie in Discovery with it. I think that logically is what should happen. You've got 2 shows going on at the moment, and somehow the finishing off of probably Discovery season 5 and this season 3 will be the end of Discovery and the end of Picard. Picard will die, kabang, poof, and they'll solve the whole thing. I'm still holding out for that. And the back the hair on the back of the head of the guy in the second.
Oh my god.
We still haven't had that resolved. That plot line, that major plot line, hasn't been resolved yet.
Well, Picard's a synth now, so.
Here's my headcanon. Picard travels back in time. He's that android. Something happens to his programming, gets all fucked up, and becomes like a regular synth. And then he's the one who destroys Utopia Planitia.
He looks like an Olympic swimmer.
Yeah, just to make Tom right. It's
just
like,
to make Tom right.
That's like the
it.
end of Voyager, where Janeway's like, I can't live with this. I have to make it right. Picard's like, no, I need to make Chief O'Brien right.
I love it.
So let's pivot to comments real quick. We got Max Eli, Hermetical,
May
from
I
Alpha 2 Omega.
May I give a little musical accompaniment while you read the comments?
Sure.
Blue skies smiling at me.
Max Eli saying Tom would like Mobile Suit Gundam, Zeta
Nothing
Unicorn.
but blue skies.
Hermetical saying, hey folks, I'm having to dip in and out, but just wanted to say thanks for all these breakdowns and discussions over the last couple months. We got from Alpha 2 Omega, who the fuck is that? Alpha 2 Omega, what the fuck kind of name is that?
But blue.
And then we got Max Eli again saying, whoa, maybe the neocons should stop banging the war drums of xenophobia.
Blue day.
Well, folks, it's been real. Thanks for joining us.
Nothing but blue skies.
What's going on? Seriously.
From now on.